When it comes to the morbidly curious, there are few things as interesting as ghosts, cryptozoology, and interesting pieces from history. One of the more unique and underlooked at ones is the Lantern Men from East Anglia in England. The Lantern Men from East Anglia are a very terrifying apparition or ghost. They differ quite heavily from will-o'-the-wisps in the fact that all reports, or most reports, depict them as actual apparitions, ghostly men wielding lanterns, whereas will-o'-the-wisps can generally be put down to swamp gases. Before we continue, I'm inclined to point out for my predominantly American or non-English audience where East Anglia actually is. So I've got this map here from the Encyclopedia Britannia. I know, very impressive. And you can see East Anglia on the right, highlighted in red. Now, East Anglia is made up of Norfolk, a county that I was born in, Suffolk, and Cambridgeshire, where you might have heard of the University of Cambridge, which is part of it. We even have our own flag, which I'm going to put up as well. I don't know why we have our own flag, I don't know where it came from, but we do, so I thought I'd share. While the will-o'-the-wisp is thought to have lured travellers to treacherous areas and sometimes to a watery grave, the Lantern Men on the marshes were said to actually physically attack whoever came into their sort of haunting area. In a 1900 copy of the Eastern Counties magazine, it says that one way of escaping their clutches is apparently if you have two men who are standing at opposite sides of a field and one found themselves being followed and stalked by a lantern man, if they both started whistling, he'd go between the two because he wouldn't know which one to go after, or if they started flashing their lanterns because the lantern man was attracted to lanterns, of course, he would go back and forth until they were able to make their escape. The magazine also notes that if you think it's possible to escape them by carrying your own torch or lantern, you are absolutely mistaken, because the reports on the sightings, which they say are very credible apparently, said that he always in fact ran towards the light. And they give an example. In the 1870s, this author, Walter Rye, writes that once he heard of one following a man while he was carrying a lantern one night, but the man knew what to do. He set the lantern down and ran away as if the devil had kicked him. When he ventured to look around again, there was the lantern man, kicking the lantern over and over again. In another more recent book, The Cambridge Folk Tales, which you can actually find from Waterstones, written by a person called Maureen James, tells of a local East Anglian man who had attracted the unwanted attention of a lantern man whilst whistling to his dog who he was walking on the marshes. Probably not a great idea at night, but there you go. In an attempt to escape, the man had taken shelter at the home of one of his friends, who hung out a horn on a long pole to distract the lantern man. The following morning, the horn was found to have been burned up, as if cinders from a lantern had been thrust upon it. Perhaps the most terrifying tale linked to the Lantern Men is the tale of one Joseph Bexfield, who was a wherryman in Norfolk. Now, a wherryman is a word you might not have come across before, and it's an English word meaning someone who owns a boat to transport goods or other people, like fishermen. And I've got this wonderful 1883 painting of fishermen, which you can see there. But anyway, back to the story. So Joseph Bexfield, on the 11th of August 1809, was drinking in the White Horse Inn, which miraculously actually still exists, and I've got a photo of it here, which is really cool. But anyway, after Joseph had probably quite a few drinks at this stage, he noticed something in the darkness on the marsh. A light was sort of bobbing along in the gloom, and he peered into the darkness and could make out a large figure slowly floating across the marshes. He told his friends this, and they said, well, thank goodness we're not going out tonight. Unfortunately, Joseph remembered something. He had left a very important parcel intended for his wife. He'd bought her something very fancy from Norwich, the city. The source doesn't state what he'd actually bought her, but it must have been very important because he immediately decided to go back. Joseph was all but ready to storm out of the pub and collect the package, but his friends stopped him. They said, come on, come back, one more drink. And so he agreed. He had one more drink, but after he'd finished his drink he still wanted to go. Probably not too sober at this point, mind. And one of his friends said, "A lantern man is upon you. Throw yourself flat on your face and halt your breathing." It was a common trick, apparently. If you saw a lantern man, you should fall flat on your face, hopefully not too painfully, and stop breathing until the light fades away. But Joseph laughed them off, pointing out how he knew the marshes better than his own home. So he finished his drink and headed off into the darkness, and it was the last time he was seen alive. The next part of the story has two conflicting reports. One of them states he was lured off the road by a lantern man, and the next day his body was found floating downstream. The other one, which is perhaps a bit nastier, states that 3 days after he went missing, his mutilated corpse washed up on the lonely marshland. His intestines were hanging out, scratches everywhere. But this source was written a bit later, so I imagine it's probably embellished, but what both agree on was that this man did drown. And we also know where he's buried, in this churchyard here. And here's a photo of the unfortunate man's gravestone. And it reads, "O cruel death, that would not spare a father kind and husband dear. Great is ye loss, to ye 3 he left behind, but he they hope will greater comfort find." According to a storyteller, Joseph himself became a lantern man, forever doomed to walk the marshes for all eternity. Sort of like playing a game of It, where you catch someone else and then they become it with you and you have to catch other people, but just a bit more ghostly. And that's the end of today's video, and hopefully you'll enjoy my next video, which will be on the elephant birds of Madagascar and how they survived probably quite a few hundred years after their presumed extinction. Similar to the moa, very cryptozoology. Anyway, thank you for watching, and you can feel free to check out my Patreon below, which would be amazing if you could donate to that. It'd be so fantastic. So thank you again for watching, and take care.